Hey, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Soul Focused Radio, where we are dedicated to bringing out the best in people. I'm your host, Martin Friedman, and I'm excited as always to be joined by my guests. I've got my D Davenport, M, our CEO and co-founder. How you doing today, M?
Doing great, doing great. How about yourself?
I'm good. And we're also joined by our good friend and facilitator, Anwar Velasquez. How you doing, Anwar?
I'm doing good, y'all. I'm doing good. Excited to be here.
Good. Awesome. So, as we get going today, we're going to have this conversation about men and masculinity, and really get it pretty explicit through racial lens, especially you, Anwar, growing up in the culture and ethnicity and race that you did, and both my D and myself as well will add in on that line of thought. But however, we wanted to just start today with a different kind of question. My D, we oftentimes when you and I are on together, all we end up talking about when we at the very beginning is the place where we are and the weather, right? Like that's like, where are you at? Oh, I'm in Florida. I'm in Houston. It's hot here. It's hot here, right? And maybe we've been sounding like a couple of old men. So today we want to start. I want to ask each of you. Anwar, I'll start with you. What are you celebrating in your life? What is exciting for you that's going on in your life right now?
There's a lot. There's a lot of exciting things. But overall, one of the things that I've been doing more is just reflecting on the day to day. And with it being the end of the year, I've been reflecting a lot on how the year went and the changes and the improvements that I made for myself. But one of the things that I'm looking forward to is I'm wrapping up my master's program. So I have a semester left. Next May is when I'll be done with it. And now I'm thinking of what the next move is going to be.
Wow, that's beautiful.
That's beautiful. That's very exciting. That's a very, very exciting development in your life, right?
Yeah. So I'm looking forward
something to be celebrated. Yeah, mm-hmm. Beautiful. What about you, my D? What's going? What in your life are you really celebrating?
I'm celebrating the growth of the Soul Focus group, right? Mm-hmm. How we are growing and how we're getting more and more clear and having clarity about what we do and why we do it, and just being able to lean into that. Of course, I'm also excited and celebrating the health of my daughters and my own health and my relationships. My relationships are getting so much better, which is making my life, the quality of my life, better. So I'm celebrating that.
Beautiful. And you actually took the one I was going to say, because I'm really celebrating my relationships too. I guess you didn't take it. We can share it, right? We can share that one. But I'm celebrating the relationships that I have in my life that are, really reciprocal relationships, really two-way relationships that are, love-based relationships. I feel like the relationships I'm in now with my family, with my colleagues, my brothers, my friends, are ones that are really about a mutual desire to grow and to support each other through everything. And I'm really celebrating that today. Really celebrating that.
I think that's a beautiful thing to celebrate. When I think about it, it warms my heart because, as males and as men in this society, through our socialization, we oftentimes don't get that intimate with each other in terms of, celebrating the beautiful relationships and the fact that we have closeness and we love one another.
That's it. And it's, it really is a beautiful thing. It sounds simplistic, but it's really actually not. I know it's taken me the better part of 58 years to have really, loving relationships with men and for that matter, with women in my life too, like really good mutual growth relationships, loving relationships with men and women. So yeah, I agree with you 100%. I would also say, my D, in addition to us not being encouraged to have loving, intimate relationships with other men, also, I don't think as men we're very much encouraged to celebrate joy very much, that the joy is almost seen, in a negative or even feminine way sometimes. And so we often spend our time being really, really serious. So I think starting with a little joy feels really good to me.
The thing I would add to that is that we are socialized as men to stay in survival mode. It's very seldom that we really, we have moments where we feel like we're living fully, for us, like you go to a football game or you're watching your favorite team play and you get in the moment with cheering and getting excited and maybe angry that your team is losing. You're in that moment and you're living around that activity. But as soon as that activity is over, you go back to survival mode, which is, being on guard, processing a lot of stuff in your head before you even get involved with it. So we stay in survival mode a lot.
That's right.
And I think, just to go off of what Madi was just brought up, because that's really how we're encapsulated to view life.
Mm.
I keep seeing the theme of the gladiator, that putting up a guard, that putting up this strong phase of being a man. But even the idea of a gladiator, you go in to survive, right? And then at what point, when you come out of that ring, or when you come out of that battle or that experience or that moment, you almost have to go back to okay, I know I have to put up that shield back on at some point, because it's about survival. So I do think that you do miss out on life and the beautiful things on life because of how we've been socialized to view masculinity.
I agree with that. It's almost like, what's the next thing? It's like we're always looking for the next thing. There's something else. Let's say you accomplish something. Like for my own personal life, I remember, playing college football and being real good at doing it and receiving all these awards for like being the captain of the team, making, the conference team and, all this stuff. And I never kept any of that stuff. I threw all of it away. All of the big plaques and trophies that I received, I threw them all away because I was always looking for the next thing. I was so much in survival mode. I never allowed myself to appreciate what my life was accomplishing, because when you're in survival mode, you don't know where the next sword is coming from, where the next sword you got to defend yourself against coming from. So you can't celebrate the victory. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree. And I really like the idea of starting off with what are we celebrating today? Because I don't think we celebrate nearly enough of things that are real in our lives too. Because even like, you mentioned earlier, my idea about sports. I know sports in my life have been, kind of, I think it's taken on and I'm not talking about participating, I'm talking about as a spectator, watching sports and being a sports fan has taken on an oversized role in my life in terms of even like how I feel, like my mood. If my team wins, I feel some joy. If they lose, I feel terrible, and I hold on to that. That's kind of the way I was raised. And it's when you really think about it, and I still love sports. I'm not saying I don't, but I really had to think about, allowing something that I can't control in my life to influence my mood like that,
Right.
and that a lot of the celebrating that we do, as you pointed out, is celebrating things that aren't really about us. We don't really spend time celebrating the things that are really about us, as the example that you just gave with your awards and stuff.
I have a question though. Like when we think of the celebrations in our lives, is it that we don't celebrate because there's an expectation that we're supposed to create those accomplishments, or that we're supposed to, like for example, for me, to celebrate something, there has to be that feeling of joy, or there has to be that feeling of happiness. There has to be that feeling, that very positive, high feeling, right? But as a man, when you're almost told that you're not supposed to have emotions, that you're not supposed to have feelings, then that expectation is almost like heightened at the level of, well, no, I mean, you should have accomplished that. That's no great accomplishment. So why are we celebrating it?
Right. I think that plays a role in it. That's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to be victorious. And I think the other thing too is just the idea that there's something else. The shoe is about to drop. There's something else that we have to do. It's like our ego won't allow us to just really just see ourselves as being, worthy. Because it's like, throughout my life, and I talk from my own experience, I was constantly trying to prove my worthiness. It had a lot to do with my relationship with my mother and my father, the abandonment that I experienced, that I felt like in order for me to keep people in my life that would love me, I had to constantly prove that I was worthy of being loved, worthy of being around. So I made up my mind when I was real young that no one was going to outwork me, which meant that whatever I accomplished, I was on to the next thing before I even received the award for the last thing.
Because of that constant seeking of love.
The constant seeking of approval for love. Like,
Yeah.
I felt like I had to prove that I was worthy of being loved, and I would go in every relationship with Danny, every woman that I cared about, trying to be this super guy, this Superman kind of guy, right?
Mm-hmm.
I remember being in one relationship when I made a mistake, and I said it was like a mistake because at the time it was because I thought I could be a regular guy, and I said to her, I said, I feel depressed. I feel a little depressed, and she went off. Not you. How could you be depressed? Oh my God. I mean, it went on for days. I was like, shit, I can't even be depressed. You know what I'm saying? So it gave me this idea. I mean, well, I should say it kept adding on to the idea that I already had, that I had to work hard to be worthy. And I couldn't even afford to have a bad day. So for me, that was like the constant drive, constantly keeping me in survival, because living is about being able to let go. Surviving is about holding on tight, right? So I was holding on tight to this idea that I needed to win love. I needed to work for it versus me being who I am for it.
Mahdi, I want you to expand a little bit more on that, because I think that's, and then maybe Anwar, as Mahdi is talking, think about how that relates to your own life, because that is so contrary to the main messages that we get, where we talk about, to say that really living is about letting go, and that hanging on to things and trying to be in control is about survival mode. Because I think a lot of us equate, control with being in charge of our lives. And so I think can you just expand on that a little bit? Because I think that's a powerful concept. And then maybe Anwar, talk about how that lands with you, in the context of our conversation today.
Well, I think this is a good conversation, because when you look at how love shows up in the world, real love, I'm not talking about just saying you love someone. I'm talking about how the nature of love is. The nature of love is freeing. It's liberating. It's giving space. So when you have love, you're letting go, because you don't feel the need to hold on tight because you're not afraid of losing it. But when you're in survival mode, everything you have, you think it's not enough. So you can't afford to let go in your mind while you're in survival mode, because you're running on scarcity. You have a scarcity mindset, regardless of what it is. It could be companionship, it could be money, it could be health, whatever it is, you're running short of it. You don't only have enough just to survive. And when you get to that point to where you see and start living in abundance within your spirit, within your vibration, then you can let go. You could breathe. It's like exhaling. You could really exhale and start living your life. Start allowing yourself to be in the moment without having to worry about the next thing, the next shoe dropping. So it's like it's a sense of freedom that you have when you're living versus when you're surviving. It's almost like you feel like you're in jail to a certain degree, but you don't have to be in a physical prison. You're in a mental prison. Because they'll be like letting go of what people think about you, letting go how they gonna perceive what makes you happy. Because as long as we are trying hard to please other people, we are holding on. We're holding on to stuff that's not even real, and that keeps us from living. It keeps us from just like showing up. Like sometimes I talk about when I had to file bankruptcy. I was down to zero, and I drove to this McDonald's restaurant to order not a Big Mac, whatever the value menu, and you really said, that'd be $2.06 or whatever, and I didn't have $2.06 in my name. The first thing that came to my mind was, what would people think about me? They knew I didn't have $2. Not how do I get out of this? What do I need to do to make sure my children are going to eat? The first thing came to my mind was, what would people think about me if they knew I didn't have $2? That's survival. That's holding on. I'm holding on to something that ain't even fucking real. Excuse my language. I ain't even real. I'm holding on to it.
And I think to go off of that, I think that's where we have to strongly analyze that the image that has been portrayed of a man by our socialization, or how we're socialized to view this image of a man, is not even real itself.
Right.
So we're functioning off of, we like to say, "Oh, I'm real, man. I'm real." No, we're not. You
Right.
know, I think
Yeah.
it's about asking that question of, like the song, right? The man in the mirror. Who are you seeing on that
Right.
mirror?
Right.
That's right. That's right. I want to talk a little bit about, both my D and I have already shared on our episode some of the messages that we got around what it means to be a man and stuff. What was that like for you? Like growing up as a little kid and into your adulthood, what messages did you get about what it meant for you to be a man?
So the messages that I received explicitly and implicitly as a young kid living in Mexico, being raised by a father who had very strong opinions of what a man was supposed to be, was one that strength, the breadwinner, the provider of the household, it truly fit the description of a machismo, of a machista, right? Someone
Mm,
that almost didn't believe in women having any sort of power. The lack of emotions, or not, I wouldn't say lack of emotions, but really the suppression of those emotions, almost as emotionless, constantly seeking, like Madi was talking about, the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And it's interesting because I recently brought this up with a group of young men that I work with, and we were talking about wealth and money and stuff like that. And I brought this up that Madi was just talked about this. If you're functioning off of your inauthentic self, you're always seeking the next thing. I told
Yes.
him, I was like, I could give you the keys to my car for free to one of you, and it still wouldn't be enough. You're still going to want something better, or that you're still going to look for the next thing. And it almost like shook them. They're like, wait a minute, we never thought of it like that. And again, I think it's because we're functioning off of that image that has been highly publicized, that it's really inauthentic and incorrect. But yeah, I would say for me, it was very, it was like very stoic, very, at times a little bit abusive, at times physically and emotionally abusive, and verbally abusive. So growing up as a young man, as a young boy, I thought, man, this is how I have to behave too. I mean, this is how I have to talk to my own sisters at times.
mm.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
highly
that's
traumatic for
powerful.
sure.
So there was a lot of trauma associated. Like obviously it probably wasn't recognized as trauma in the moment by you, but looking back on it, there was a lot of trauma associated with what it meant to be a man. That's what I hear you saying.
Absolutely. And you talk about it wasn't seen as trauma. Well, in how our culture, how my culture, and through my experience and through my lens, it's almost like trauma is non-existent.
Mm,
So to talk about these things is highly traumatic. It's one is new to me, and it's revitalizing for sure.
Mm.
that's powerful. Madi, was that your experience too growing up that like nobody talked about trauma, things that were traumatic were just accepted and you just didn't even really see it or talk about it like that?
Yeah, because the idea of trauma was normal. Growing up, I
Mm,
saw and heard. I had friends who were killed and shot and stabbed, and you know, I had uncles who every weekend they were involved with some kind of violent uproar. So
mm,
you learn to just normalize it, and but my nerves was like I had bad nerves as a child, because I used to always be on edge, always waiting for the next shoe to drop, like for the next
Mhm.
police to come arrest one of my uncles, for him to maybe shot somebody or one of them to be killed. So it was
mm,
a constant thing, always on edge, always on edge. So I didn't learn how to relax until a whole lot later on in life, to really just be able to take a breath. So much in survival mode. And I think being in that survival mode, scarcity becomes like your reality, and like just like Anwar said, you could give something. I remember like you could give something to somebody, like a brand new car. And when you're in survival mode, that is not going to do anything for you. You're gonna, matter of fact, you probably destroy the car because you have no value. You see no value in it
Yeah.
because you on to the next
mm,
thing. You know what I'm saying? It's hard to appreciate anything in life when you're in survival mode. It's hard to get the best out of you. It's almost impossible to get the best out of you when you're in survival mode.
mm. Yeah, I appreciate that, you all. I think for me, my experience, I didn't have that overt. violence around me. Growing up, in the suburb, we were pretty close to Cleveland, so I wasn't that removed from violence. But in terms of like in my home or right, in my neighborhood on my street, like you all talked about, it really didn't exist. However, being raised in the generational, trauma of being an Ashkenazi Jewish person, a European Jew racialized as white in this country, but coming from that experience, that experience was a lot of trauma. And so there was this carried trauma, this generational trauma. And, Madi, what's really hitting me today when you talk about survival mode is like we were definitely in survival mode. The messages I got from my father was a child of the Depression, and that was all about survival. Literally his family would move, from like every month for a while, they moved to save like $5 on rent, so that they could, afford to have a place to live, in the 1920s and, excuse me, 1930s. So I very much got those from such a different perspective than you all just talked about, but I still got such strong messages about survival. And I got such strong messages that like what you do will never be enough.
Right.
And my father worked a hard job. He was a small business owner, but his business was a warehouse with delivery service for charcoal and rock salt. And he worked really, really hard every day. And I never, like, I can think of maybe 1 or 2 days that he took off. And, he would go in with colds, he would go in sick. And the messages that I got is that, always prioritize other people over yourself, other people over your health. And it was always a survival message, even though it came through a very, very different lens.
I think that is like the primary problem in our society. That I would say probably about 95% of the population lives in survival mode. I should say, exist in survival mode, and it's hard for us to see and even believe that there's something beyond that, right? So people call it the fourth dimension, the fifth dimension. The third dimension is survival. It's us being stuck in survival mode and not able to see that we live in a universe where we can create what we desire. Just like money is created right now, how we're creating these Bitcoin money and this cryptocurrency. We're creating money from out of thin air because we have the power to create and socially construct a society the way we see fit. But when you're in survival mode, you keep reconstructing what you already had. You keep doing what you already done. You get what you already got. That's what survival mode is.
Right? And I think about too, like how highly traumatic that could be. I think of on the first series, Mahdi talked about the gladiator, and I also think about they wear the shield, or I think about myself as a police officer, and I had to wear that vest, right, that bulletproof vest. So if it was highly likely that if I were to get shot on that area where the vest was protecting me from, that I was going to survive. But underneath that layer, there's still bruising. There's still that trauma itself of receiving such a impact in your life. At what point do we say, all right, now I survived, but then how do I go on to living? And that's that process of healing. But I think as men, we're not giving, or we weren't given the message that truly to be able to live, it's about healing.
Yes, that's so true.
Right.
So true, Amor. Because if we don't heal, to me, it's like healing is the rite of passage or the doorway to living. Because as long as you still carrying that hurt, oftentimes the resentment, even the need for revenge or to want people to be punished. I sometimes I tell people about, I had struggles with my mother and she didn't even know it, but because of the way I grew up and like I told you, the abandonment issues with her and my father, when I got to a point, I started doing some work on myself to heal. It brought me into direct communication with my mother to confront her on some of the stuff that she did that made me feel abandoned, et cetera, et cetera. And she apologized. We cried together, and I shared everything that I felt about what happened. And then she said something to me that to me was a gift, right? But my ego didn't like it. She says, Mama's so sorry about putting y'all through all of that. She says, the place I was in, I was immature, et cetera, et cetera. I didn't know what I was doing. And I'm not making no excuses. I was wrong. But she says, Mama has healed herself from that. She says, now I've healed from that. I've done my work. You need to do your work. And if you have a problem with me moving forward, that's going to be on you. Mm-hmm. I'm moving forward. I'm living my life. And I was sitting there, my ego was sitting there like, what? What you just said? You don't get to just walk away like that. And I'm supposed to have a period of being able to make you feel bad for a while before you move on and get a chance to live your life. And she was like, no, baby, you got to go do your work because I've done mine. I'm going on and live my life. That's how many of us are. In our trauma and our pain, we want somebody to pay for it. We want to be angry. We want a period of time to be able to make the other person feel bad and feel guilty about what happened. Meanwhile, you're still not healing. So when she said I've healed, you need to heal yourself. It was a beautiful gift because it was the reality of how life is. If I want to live my life, which is my time, then I have to dedicate myself and decide that I'm going to let go. I'm going to let go of all this hurt. I'm going to let go of all this anger. I'm going to let go of all this resentment. I'm going to let go. And I'm letting go for me. I let go for me because I wanted to get into living. I had to let that go, you know? But oftentimes we're not willing to let that go around the conversation around race and racism. We're not willing to let some of that stuff go, but we don't realize while you're holding on to it, you're also holding your life back from living. Mm-hmm. You're not holding the other person's life back. My mama said, she made it clear. I'm going on. I'm living mine. You can stay stuck here if you want. I'm not even going to come visit you.
Mm-hmm. There's a quote that actually my wife Felicia sent me today that I think is really appropriate, and I want to maybe talk about this a little bit. It just hadn't occurred to me to share it till just this minute as you were talking, my D. And I just want to read this quote real quick. This is a quote from the book Radical Dharma, and the quote says this is part of it. It says, "I know that sometimes we distrust healing because it means that we have to imagine a different way of being in the world beyond our anger, woundedness, or despair. Moreover, we believe that to move beyond these hurts means that we can no longer be attuned to the suffering of communities and people struggling for justice, equality, or basic visibility. Or maybe because we feel that healing means forgetting that we have been hurt, oppressed, and that there is an oppressor who should and must be held accountable for their violence. Perhaps we think healing means weakness, that we are no longer strong when we are healed, or that healing zaps our superhuman ability of being pissed off and agitated, which we think keeps us conscious and present." I'm just wondering how that lands on you both, especially through the lens of what we're talking about with being a man, because I'll just say quickly that, anger has been my default pretty much my whole life. I said earlier that there was no overt violence in my home, but there was covert violence. There was behind the scenes, sexual abuse that I went through in my family. And, it took me so long to heal from that what I found myself, and I didn't want to heal. I wanted to be angry. I held on to my anger as if it was my flotation device, and that I was drowning. You know what I mean? I was drowning in the sea, and I had my anger. If I didn't have my anger, I would drown. That's how I felt. And Anwar, you don't know, you haven't really known me in that angry place, but my D certainly has. And everybody that I've been close to that is still in my life has gone through a phase where anger was always my default. And I think that that quotation and what you were saying, my D, is so appropriate for what we're talking about, because anger to me felt so necessary to feel alive. And what I hear you saying is it's the opposite of being alive, that anger means you're just surviving. You're not really celebrating being alive, which right. means letting go of all that anger and all those things that happened to you.
It is too, anger is addictive. When you're in survival mode, it makes you feel powerful. And powerful in terms of in resisting, to resist. But what you don't realize, what you're resisting is life itself. You're resisting right. going forward. But that anger and that hostility you feel inside yourself, and rage sometimes for other people, it charges up your ego and makes your ego feel powerful. Meanwhile, what it's doing is holding you back from going forward. So you look at the clock, and the clock is not even moving. Like you're living in the same problems year after year, month after month. You're dealing with the same stuff you've always been dealing with, and you don't see yourself growing. You don't see yourself evolving. That's what anger does for you, because it will keep you in survival mode. It only knows how to do that anyway.
Right. Howard, talk a little bit about your relationship to anger. You already, said a little bit around your father, and what was your experience with anger, growing up and where it's been in your life?
I think the way I'm going to say it, I think it will paint the picture beautifully for you all and all the listeners. But I like to think, and I think about myself at times, that when I was born, I wasn't born crying. I was born angry. I actually think of me maybe looking at the doctor all pissed, like, why the hell am I here? Right. And I think that's been the proverbial question at times throughout my life of the abuse that I received, or maybe the racialized trauma that I received moving to the United States, the discrimination. That question will pop up at times, that why the hell am I here? And yeah, I think anger throughout my life has taken a large toll, and actually I feel like it has taken control of the steering wheel at times for me, and I don't realize how much impact it also has had on others, and what hurts I've caused on others unintentionally. So it's been a painful process to really think about anger and how it's been such a part of my DNA, and to think that it's a part of my DNA when it's not, right? Inside, it's almost like it takes two forms, because inside of me, I'm just like, I'm crying inside, wanting to escape that anger, but that anger is just holding me back from really releasing the true and the beautiful side of me. So yeah, and I think at times too that, I say at times that I won't die from a heart attack. I'm going to die from an anger attack. Yeah. So
wow.
That trauma for me, I know it's something that is work that needs to be done, and that is healing that needs to be started for sure.
Wow. Thank you for sharing it, Amor. I love the way you expressed it, because I can really, relate to that. When I was in college, people used to say it looked like I walked around like I was so mad, like I could beat up concrete. And people were afraid to talk to me, because the look on my face was, I was angry. I was like 2 seconds from going to jail, because if you mess with me, I was going to hurt you and probably end up in jail. Mm-hmm. So people would just avoid me altogether. I was angry about everything, how I came into the world, why life had to be so difficult, why, were me and my two brothers abandoned, why we had to deal with that, the whole 9 yards. It was always like, somebody got to pay for this. You don't realize that, what at the same time, like I'm the kind of guy that goes to a movie, for example, and you see people loving each other, and it will make me cry. I was literally sitting and crying. So I take my daughters to the movie, and they're like, "Daddy, are you gonna cry now?" Because they know it's coming. They're like, they know the tears are getting ready to come, because I'm a very sensitive guy. But yet the anger for years would prevent me from being able to get to being letting that sensitivity out. And that sensitivity is like highly intelligent. It allows me to connect with people in a way that gives me the power to help facilitate bringing out the best in them and myself. But I would suppress that, because I would choose anger over it. I would choose anger over caring, choose anger over love, because I just felt powerful in my anger, being in survival mode. It's like I needed it. When you're in survival mode, you need anger, because you don't know when you're going to have to be hostile.
And my dear, I have a question for you, because I think about this often. And just hearing you say just made me reflect a lot. You even said that you would choose anger. Do you really think you would choose that, or you were choosing that consciously or subconsciously? It was kicking in.
Oh, it was subconscious. It was definitely yeah. It wasn't something that I was like, I'm gonna choose anger today.
Yeah.
Like default. It was a default choice, constantly because that's what I knew. I knew it, and I trusted it. I trusted my anger. I didn't trust my caring. I didn't trust my sensitivity. I trusted my my anger, because my anger helped me survive all those years. So, it's my faithful. It was my faithful servant.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And in that process of you trusting anger, it was not allowing you to trust others.
Right. And trust myself, because anger is not us. Anger is not who you are.
Mm-hmm.
Anger is a state of mind that your ego finds itself in, because your ego cannot really accept responsibility for the reality of your life. Only your authentic self can do that. So as long as your ego is up front and center, anger is always something that it takes as a sword into the fight.
Mm-hmm.
So, my D, just not everybody listening right now is gonna have the same definition of ego. And like, just say what you said, but tell us again, like, what do you really mean when you're saying that? Like, when you talk about the ego and what it does and doesn't do in that situation.
So when I say ego, what I mean is that we're in our inauthentic self, our performative self. So in my situation, who I thought I was supposed to be as a man was taking precedence over who I really was.
Mm-hmm.
So, and the anger was a part of who I thought I was supposed to be. I thought I was supposed to be tough. I was supposed to be rugged. I was supposed to not feel anything. I was supposed to be able to take anything on and never break, be the one that works the longest, come in the earliest and get off the last one to get off. That's who I thought I was supposed to be, which is in my ego. That's all I mean when I say ego, that being in my performative self rather than being in my authentic self, allowing my feelings, who I really felt like I was inside, to come out.
Mm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense with what we're talking about right now is that, so the way that I think about it now that I've really come to learn, with you as one of my main teachers, but the simple way is that for me is that ego is always measuring me against somebody else.
Yes.
And that's the core for me of what it's meant to be a man, to be raised as a man. Am I this enough? Am I that enough? Am I macho enough? Am I strong enough? Am I fast enough? Or am I too sensitive? Am I too effeminate? Or I have too much feminine energy. I wouldn't say effeminate, but I would say feminine energy. And I also think that when we talk about anger, and I think it's really powerful that all three of us identify with this anger issue. I was laughing when you talked about how you came out angry, Anwar, because my parents told me the very first thing I did was like piss on the doctor,
Mm-hmm.
and it was like, and basically, but the next line is basically you've been pissing on the world ever since, is what they told me, the same thing. They're like, you came out angry with the world, So that's why I was laughing when you said that. But I think it's fascinating because I think anger has made me feel more like a man. And I think when I'm angry is when I feel most like a man. And in the very sort of toxically masculine way that, being a man, that manness or maleness has been laid out for me. But I think part of why I have hung on to anger so much, is because that in many ways is exactly what I associate with being a man. Because I do feel strong and powerful in my anger. Even in the moment, it doesn't last. It's not sustainable. When the anger's gone, there's a lot of emptiness there. There's a lot of loneliness there. There's often like feeling like crap about myself, and I've got to now go back and apologize. And even if my anger was quote unquote righteous, because I went to an angry place and I became the bad guy. So all of this complex stuff happens afterwards. But in the moment, I think one of the reasons why I've held on to that as a default in any given situation is because it makes me feel strong and powerful. Wow. Like you said, that's an illusion. And really what ego really is for our listeners is ego is an illusion. It's an illusion that is presented to you that is not who you really are. It's not who we really are. That's what ego really is at its core, right, Mahdi? I mean, it's an illusion, and we put so much energy into maintaining that illusion as opposed to being honest and open and vulnerable as to who we really are. That's our true self, and that's what you mean when you say letting go.
Right. Because living is being in your authentic self. It is being spontaneous, is being unpredictable and serendipitous.
Right.
And that could occur to people like a risk. It could strike fear in people. When you're in survival mode, the idea of being spontaneous is like terrifying. You mean to tell me I'm just gonna show up and just let it happen?
Mm-hmm.
The anger is our way of controlling in our mind, controlling the situation. And ego needs control. It needs to have that sense of control, even though control is not real. The more you get, the more you need, because it's not real. Any insatiable desire that you have is not real. What I mean by it's not real, it cannot fulfill you, because it's based on performative stuff. It's not based upon stuff that's real, that's rooted in the nature of who you are. So the whole idea of us, who we've been socialized to think being a man is a performative thing. It's like it's a character that we've been taught to play, and we've been taught to play it in spite of the beautiful person inside of us that's been wanting to show up, that's authentic, spontaneous human being that's full of love and care and and sensitivity, that doesn't come out because the character we're playing says you can't marry these characters together.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. So, this has been an amazing conversation. And, as we wrap up, we entitled this podcast series, A New Man. And I think, one of the things I've been thinking a lot about, Anwar Mahdi, is that I don't think we have to give up being a man or being male in what that means to us in order to be able to do this out of our ego, to do it in a loving, open, non-angry, vulnerable way. I think that's what we really mean when we say new man, is that we are okay with our identities as men and understanding that there's a broad range there, right? And we're going to do our best to cover that broad range. But for us, it's not losing that or trying to be something that we're not, but it's a new version of that that's grounded in something totally different. So Anwar, maybe just talk for a minute about what does that mean? What does a new man mean to you? Because clearly, listening to your story, you're on that journey. You've been very much on that journey, and you have access to young men. So what is the new man for you, and what is it that you're getting across to these young men in your life?
So yeah, I think a lot of the messaging that I've been looking at more internally and also giving out externally is to really essentially challenge those messages that you received as a young man that are in contradiction with what your true heart is telling you. Because when I think when I think of myself as a man and someone that received the message of control or having to have anger or having to be always strong and no emotions, I think again about when I was a baby. Was I always like that, or was I told to be like that? And if I wasn't like that, then that should tell you, that gives you the picture of who you are as a man instead of who you were told to be as a man. And also, just to go off of what Mahdi just beautifully brought up today, is finding and letting go, and also really finding your life instead of constantly being in survival. Think about how liberating mentally and spiritually that would be for anyone to truly give away or to give up those things and to let go of those images that were downloaded into us of what a man should be, and actually engage with people and create relationships with people, with one another, in a way that your heart is telling you and that your spirit is leading you with too.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's powerful, because I think about how powerful we can be, right? Mm-hmm. When we are free of being concerned with what people think about us. Because so much of that stuff is based on illusionary stuff that's not real. And we get stuck in there. In any place, people that listen, any place in your life where you are in survival mode, you are not happy. Mm-hmm. Not being your best. You're not bringing out your best. You have to let go to get into living, to really experience what being your best really looks like. And that's what we wanted the Soul Focus Group. We want to bring out the best in you, because that's what we do. We bring out the best in people.
Yeah, thanks to both of you. And Mahdi, I've really been thinking a lot about what does that mean in terms of being a man. I think so much of my socialization about being a man has not been aligned with being my best, that it's been a very limiting box to live in. And what we're asking people, I love that you talked about letting go a lot, and that living is letting go, and that holding on is just being in survival mode. in order for us to thrive and move past survival mode, we have to let go. And so we've got to let go of these identities that we've been holding on to that we think define us. Otherwise, we can't be at our best, and we can't help other people be their best either, right? So, yeah, I really like all these conversations. These have been incredible conversations, and I appreciate you coming and bringing your perspective, Anwar, and Adi, as always, man. I love the conversations that we have. So, any last things that either of you want to say before we close out?
I would just say, to practice self-care, and self-care being accurately representing what you really feel, what you really think, what you really desire in life, what your perspective is, and what you really experience. To accurately, I should say uncompromisingly, represent it to others. Because when you do that, you're caring for yourself. And as men, we tend to not care about ourselves. We tend to put everybody before us. We really do, especially when those of us who consider ourselves good men. Those are the men that are going straight to the graveyard because we are ignoring so many of even our own health issues because we're not accurately representing how we feel to people. We keep hiding. We got to stop hiding. Let go of that, and come out and live.
Thank you.
Yeah, and for me, I would say start to think about the healing process and what does healing mean to you, and how could it change your life, and how, again, here in Soul Focus, we're about bringing the best out of people. So how can healing bring out the best out of you and truly bring out the lights that are inside of maybe that dark tunnel at times? So yeah, think of it and think of it too in a holistic approach, not just healing physically, but also mentally, spiritually, and any of the other healing phases that we talk about.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you both. This has been an awesome conversation. I feel like, I feel a connection to both of you through this. I feel like I've learned and been enlightened by both of you. So I just really, I want to close out by celebrating that. I want to celebrate the way we're able to talk with each other. We started with celebration, but I want to end with celebration too, and just celebrating both of you and the role that you both play in my life. And I just really want to, show you both appreciation for that.
Ditto, Martin. Right back at you, brother.
For sure. Much love to both of you.
Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely.
I appreciate the warm way that you express the things that you express, because it's like it gives us an opening to go and really get to know you.
That's right. Well, and we want everybody listening to know that we all love you, and we really mean that. We really do, as we have learned that we have to lead with love, and everything we do. You're going to hear this from us all the time. Everything we do is dedicated to being the best people that we can be. We're dedicated to you being in your best self. And everything we do will be dedicated to that, has been dedicated to that, and will be dedicated to that. We ask you that you come and check out a wide range of services that we offer now at soulfocusgroup.com. Those are going to grow and grow. And in our episodes coming up, we're going to talk more and more about specific services that we're going to be offering to you all to help get us all to the best, the place where we're in the best of ourselves. So we just want to thank you again. We ask that everybody stay safe, stay well, and most of all, stay soul focused.